on her wedding day. The doors opened. The bride stepped into the chapel, yet it wasn't her dress that captured the room. It was her nose, swollen and strangely elevated. It looked grotesque, almost unreal. It curved sharply upward, stretched tight and glossy like a blue-skinned character from Avatar. A strange sour stench, faint at first, began to spread through the air, as if something rotten were hidden beneath layers of perfume. The bridesmaids glanced at each other. The groom couldn't bring himself to look her in the eyes. The whispers around her grew louder, sharper, and suddenly she felt dizzy, her world spinning, until her legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. So what happened to her nose? Stay until the very end to see what her own foolish decision did to her face. Alyssa stood still under the warm lights of the bridal boutique, surrounded by whispers of silk and satin. The mirror in front of her was grand, floor to ceiling, 3 panels wide, designed to reflect dreams. And yet, as she stared at herself in the lace-bodied, pearl-buttoned gown that hugged her waist like it was made just for her, she didn't smile. Her mother gasped softly from the plush chair nearby. "You look beautiful," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. The boutique assistant clapped her hands together. "This one, for sure. It's the one," Alyssa nodded, lips parting slightly, eyes never leaving the reflection. It was beautiful. The dress, the lighting, the setting. It was everything a bride was supposed to dream about. But something, it always came back to the same thing, was off. She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing at her own face. Not the hair, the makeup, or the neckline, the nose. It had haunted her for years. A little too flat at the bridge, a little too soft at the tip. Not that anyone ever pointed it out. In fact, Ryan always said he loved her face, called it elegantly balanced. But to her, it was a reminder. A flaw that never quite let her forget that she wasn't like the others. The others. Her friends, former classmates, influencers she followed in quiet obsession. Perfect petite noses that caught light just right, sloped gently in profile, pointed upward with effortless confidence. And now, with the wedding 6 months away, the idea of walking down the aisle with her current face, her before face, felt like showing up to her own fairy tale unfinished. She turned from the mirror, the layers of tulle swishing softly around her ankles. Her mother looked up, concerned. "You don't like it?" "I do," Alyssa said quickly. "It's perfect." But her voice didn't match the word. That evening, Ryan met her at their favorite wine bar, a small cozy place with brick walls and dim string lights. He leaned over the table, taking her hand, excitement in his eyes. "So? Did you find the dress?" Alyssa nodded. "I did," he smiled. "I wish I could see it. You will. At the altar." She smiled, softer this time, but her eyes still held something distant. Ryan watched her closely. "What's going on?" "Nothing," she said too quickly, then paused. "I've just been thinking about the photos, about looking my best." "You're going to be stunning," he said without hesitation. She hesitated. "Do you think my nose looks wide in profile?" Ryan blinked. "What? No, where did that come from? It's just..." She glanced away. "I've been looking at bridal photos. A lot of brides get touch-ups, small refinements, just to feel their best." He leaned back, frowning. "Alyssa, you are your best. I just want to be perfect," she said quietly. Ryan leaned forward again, his voice firmer now. "You already are, and I love you because you're you, not a filter, not someone else's idea of perfect." Alyssa said nothing, because it wasn't really about what Ryan saw. It was about what she saw, and every time she looked in the mirror, she didn't see elegance. She saw almost. That night, she lay in bed beside him, phone dimmed to night mode, screen glowing softly beneath the sheets. Her thumb scrolled past images tagged #bridal transformation, landing on before and after photos of brides who looked stunning, reshaped, flawless. She clicked through to a spa account offering a limited-time wedding beauty package, non-surgical chin lifts, jawline sculpting, and rhinoplasty. Only $899. Financing options available. A testimonial video, auto-played. A young woman in a satin robe smiling. "I didn't think it would make such a difference," she said. "But when I saw myself in the mirror, I finally felt like the bride I always dreamed of being." Alyssa bit her lip. The spa was local. The pictures were convincing. The price was too good to ignore. She bookmarked the link. 3 days later, during her lunch break, Alyssa parked behind a strip mall on the edge of town. The entrance to the clinic was nestled between a vape shop and a dry cleaner. Inside, it was clean, with faux marble counters and soothing instrumental music playing from hidden speakers. The receptionist wore full glam makeup and greeted her like an old friend. "You're here for the consultation, right? Bride-to-be." Alyssa nodded. "Great," the woman said, beaming. "We've had so many brides lately. You're gonna love your results. And with our special package, you'll be wedding photo ready in no time." The doctor, if he was one, looked barely older than Alyssa, wore sneakers and had a lazy confidence about him. He flipped through a few before and after photos on an iPad, all showing dramatic improvements. "We use high-grade silicone, minimal downtime. You'll be back to work in 2 days, full heal by wedding. You won't regret it." Lissa asked about FDA approval, safety. He brushed the questions off with a smile. "We've done hundreds, all clean. Besides, your case is easy. Just a bridge lift, contouring, straightforward, bar." He hesitated. He noticed. "Look," he said, voice lowering. "Do you want to look back on your wedding photos and wish you'd done something?" That line hit. It landed deep. The next morning, she placed the deposit. Ryan didn't know. 2 weeks later, as she sat in the recovery room with a bandage across her face and a prescription bottle in her purse, Alyssa felt a strange calm, as if she'd finally taken control, finally done the thing that would silence that critical voice in her head. She imagined walking down the aisle, eyes on her, flashbulbs catching every angle. Not just beautiful, undeniably beautiful. Perfect. Or so she thought. The bandages came off exactly 6 days after the procedure. Alyssa sat upright in the narrow clinic chair, staring at herself in a handheld mirror while the nurse peeled back the final strip of surgical tape. Her face looked swollen, bruised, slightly unnatural, but beneath the inflammation she could see the outline of what she had wanted. The bridge was straighter, the tip more defined. Her reflection looked closer to the women she envied. The nurse smiled. "See? Just wait a week or two. The swelling will go down. You'll be ready for Vogue." Alyssa chuckled politely, but the laugh felt hollow. The sharp throbbing behind her eyes was dull, persistent. The doctor came in briefly, offered a thumbs up, and reminded her to finish the antibiotics. "You're healing beautifully," he said, glancing at her nose for less than 3 seconds. She wanted to believe it, so she did. The first few days back home, Alyssa stayed mostly inside. The bruises were still too obvious, and she didn't want Ryan asking questions he wasn't ready to hear. She told him she was tired, had a mild sinus infection, needed rest. Ryan, ever trusting, brought her soup and let her sleep. But on day 10 he noticed something. They were sitting on the couch, a movie playing in the background, when he leaned in to kiss her cheek and paused. His brow furrowed. "Are you wearing perfume?" Alyssa blinked. "No. Why?" "There's this weird smell. Kind of like metal and antiseptic." She froze. "It's probably the ointment I'm using," she lied. "For my skin." He didn't press, but his eyes lingered a little too long. That night, Alyssa stood in front of the mirror for 20 straight minutes. The bruising was almost gone. The shape of her nose was becoming more visible, but something was off. The tip looked firmer than it should, a little too rigid. When she touched the bridge, there was no give. It felt like something solid, something set in place rather than part of her. The skin had begun to take on a faint sheen, tight, like it was being stretched from beneath. Still, she dismissed it. She told herself healing wasn't linear. She'd read that somewhere. Besides, she had more important things to focus on. The engagement photos were coming up, and she had the perfect outfit picked out. A backless ivory dress with sheer sleeves, hair pulled up to highlight her face. The new face. The morning of the shoot, Ryan watched her getting ready. "You look different," he said carefully. She turned to him. "Different how?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Your face just looks tighter." Alyssa's jaw tensed. "I'm wearing a lot of setting spray." Ryan stepped closer. "Are you sure you're okay?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked into the other room. The photo shoot took place in a sun-drenched park filled with autumn leaves and gentle wind. From a distance, Alyssa looked radiant. The camera loved her angles. The photographer showed them a preview on the screen and gushed, "You guys are gorgeous." But up close, the makeup artist had whispered to her twice, asking if she wanted more concealer around her nose. "There's a bit of purpling under the skin," she said softly. "Nothing major. I can cover it." Alyssa nodded stiffly. The pictures turned out stunning. Online, they racked up hundreds of likes. Her friends commented fire emojis and wrote, "Model couple, that dress, obsessed with your look." But Alyssa knew. Under the makeup, under the filters, something was brewing. By the end of the third week, the pressure had grown. A low-grade ache had taken residence between her eyes. Bending forward made her temples pulse. And then came the bleeding, just a small spot on the pillowcase one morning. Then two, then streaks. She messaged the clinic. They replied with a smiling emoji and said, "Normal, just your body adjusting. Keep using saline spray. You're golden, babe." She wanted to believe them. Again, she did, until Ryan found the receipts. He had been searching for their wedding itinerary on her laptop when he opened the wrong folder. At first he thought it was spam. Then he saw the invoice, the before and after previews, the payment confirmation. When Alyssa walked in, he was holding the screen toward her. "You lied," he said. She dropped her bag. "It's not what you think. You had surgery, Alyssa, on your face. And you didn't tell me?" She swallowed. "I didn't want you to worry." "I am worried," he snapped. "You let someone cut into your face at some back alley clinic, and now your skin is discolored. Your nose smells like something's dying and you still think it's fine?" Her face twisted. "Don't exaggerate." "I'm not," he said, softer now. "I love you. I've always loved you. And you keep trying to become someone else." She looked away. "I wanted to feel proud walking beside you," he continued. "But I don't recognize the woman I'm supposed to marry anymore. You don't talk to me, you don't trust me, because you don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like to feel less than. Every woman I know has done something. Botox, fillers, tweaks. I just wanted a better version of me, but this isn't better," he said quietly. "It's breaking you, and it's breaking us." That night, Ryan left the apartment. Not forever, but he didn't say when he'd be back. Alyssa sat alone in the bathroom, the overhead light humming, mirror casting a pale reflection. She removed her makeup slowly, methodically, layer by layer, until only the truth was left behind. Her nose was swelling again. The tip had a bluish tint. The skin looked thin. She pressed the bridge gently. It didn't move. Alyssa stopped taking selfies. That was the first real sign something was wrong. At first, she told herself she was just tired of social media, exhausted by the filters and the endless scroll of flawless skin and sculpted faces. But deep down, she knew. It wasn't about the feed, it was about the fact that she couldn't look at herself without flinching. The swelling hadn't gone away, it had changed, hardened. Her nose no longer looked sharp, it looked swollen in ways that were difficult to describe. Not large, not red, just unnatural. The tip, once cute and button-like in the clinic preview, now looked misshapen. The skin around the base felt tight, like it was being pulled from within. And worst of all, sometimes when she touched it, lightly, fearfully, she felt something shift beneath her fingers. Not soft tissue, something harder, something wrong, but she said nothing. She told herself it was normal. Healing took time, bodies adjusted differently. Some days were better than others. At work, she became quieter. Her coworkers noticed. Amanda from HR even commented once, "You're usually so put together." "Everything okay?" Alyssa smiled tightly. "Just not sleeping well." The truth was, sleep had become a game of avoidance. She stayed up late Googling nose implant rejection and infection signs after rhinoplasty until the articles blurred together. A parade of horror stories she told herself didn't apply to her. Because if they did, if she admitted this was real, she would have to face everything she had risked, and everything she could lose. She wore heavier makeup than ever, not for glamour, but for concealment. Color corrector, full coverage foundation, setting spray layered like armor. Even then, under certain lights, the shine of tension on her skin betrayed her. She stopped video calling her mom. She ignored texts from her bridesmaids. She even pushed back her final dress fitting with a vague excuse about a skin flare-up. It was all manageable, until the morning she woke up with her pillowcase stained yellow, not red, not blood, pus. Alyssa stared at it for a long time, frozen in the early morning light. Then slowly reached for her phone and turned the camera to selfie mode. What she saw made her stomach tighten. The skin on the left side of her nose was slightly raised, almost blistered. A faint glisten of clear fluid shimmered under the nostril. When she pressed, very gently, pain flared, not dull, not aching, sharp. She gasped and pulled her hand back. Still, she didn't call a hospital. Instead, she messaged the spa. They responded 3 hours later with a cheerful, emoji-filled reply, totally normal in rare cases. Some patients have a minor purging phase. Just apply warm compresses and stay on your meds, girl. You're healing, promise. Alyssa read the message 5 times. She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it, because what was the alternative? That she'd made a mistake? That she had trusted the wrong people with her face, her future, her wedding? She paced the living room in silence. Ryan still hadn't come back. She had sent him 2 messages over the last week, neither of which had been read. He was serious this time, and she was alone. By that evening, the pressure behind her eyes had grown worse. She took 2 Advil and drank water. Told herself it was just stress. She avoided mirrors. She scrolled past wedding content on Instagram with a bitter swipe. Other brides smiled, glowing and perfect, captioning things like, "Can't wait to marry my best friend," while she sat alone, with a heating pad on her face and a heart that felt bruised. Later that night, she caught her reflection by accident. Side profile, in the darkened microwave screen as she waited for tea. What she saw made her breath catch. The slope of her nose was warped now. The bridge curved unevenly, like something inside had shifted. The skin around the implant looked thinned, almost shiny, like it was stretched to the limit. It didn't look refined. It didn't look improved. It looked like it didn't belong to her anymore. Alyssa backed away from the kitchen, her tea forgotten. In her chest, panic stirred like a storm on the edge of breaking. But still, she told herself it could wait. One more day. She didn't know it yet, but the body doesn't wait. It responds, it warns, and when you ignore it long enough, it stops whispering. It starts to scream. Alyssa's one more day didn't last even 12 hours. By morning, her face felt heavier, as if the center of her skull had filled with wet sand. The pressure behind her eyes wasn't a headache anymore. It was a dull, pulsing force that made it hard to focus, hard to breathe, hard to pretend. When she sat up in bed, her vision blurred for a second, then snapped back. She reached for her phone and opened the camera again, bracing herself. The swelling had spread upward along the bridge, not dramatically, but enough that her nose looked subtly raised in a way that didn't match the rest of her face. The skin was tighter than ever, shiny. The faint purple discoloration from earlier weeks had deepened into something darker, like a bruise that refused to heal. Then she saw it, a tiny dot at the tip, barely larger than a pinhole but unmistakably wet. A bead of fluid clung there like a warning. Alyssa's hands shook as she touched it. The moment her finger made contact, pain shot through her so fast she jerked back. Tears stung her eyes, not from emotion, but from the pure electrical intensity of it. Her body was not adjusting. Her body was revolting. She stumbled into the bathroom, turned on the light, and leaned toward the mirror. The smell hit her before she could even process what she was seeing. It wasn't strong like garbage. It was worse than that, because it was human. A sour, sickly odor that made her stomach twist. It didn't belong in a bathroom. It belonged in something decaying. Her breath came in short bursts. Her mind tried to manufacture explanations the way it always did, scrambling for anything less terrifying than the truth. Maybe it's the ointment. Maybe it's blood. Maybe it's nothing. But the mirror didn't care what she hoped. It showed her what was real. She lifted her chin and tilted her face to the side. The skin at the tip of her nose looked thinner than it had yesterday, almost translucent. The shape beneath it was becoming clearer, sharper. And for the first time, she had a sick, unmistakable thought. Is that the implant? Her throat tightened. She took a cotton swab, dabbed carefully at the wet dot. The swab came away yellow. Not clear, not pink, yellow. She swallowed hard, then pressed the swab again, just to make sure she wasn't imagining it. A second smear appeared. Thicker this time, almost sticky. Alyssa gripped the sink as her knees weakened. She stared at her reflection with the kind of horror people reserve for car accidents, house fires, things you can't undo. Then, without thinking, she opened her texts and typed Ryan's name. Her fingers hovered above the screen. What would she even say? "Hey, I know you're upset, but my nose is leaking pus and I think it's rotting." She deleted the message. Her pride was still alive, even as her face was falling apart. Instead, she called the spa. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. She stared at the screen, then tried the clinic number from the invoice. Disconnected. Her heartbeat jumped. She searched the spa's name online. The page loaded slowly. When it finally appeared, her stomach dropped. The Instagram account was gone. The website wouldn't load. Even the Google listing had changed. Temporarily closed, with a handful of new reviews posted overnight. This place is a scam. They botched my face. They deleted my messages. I'm filing a complaint. Alyssa felt her hands go cold. She stood there in her apartment, her wedding invitations stacked neatly on the counter, a floral seating chart on the fridge, a bridal planner open to a page titled Final Countdown, and realized something terrifying. She had trusted strangers with her face. And now those strangers had disappeared. That was the moment the denial cracked, not fully, not in a dramatic confession, but enough for panic to finally slip through. She grabbed her purse, threw on a hoodie, and drove to an urgent care clinic 10 minutes away. Her hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly her fingers ached. Every bump in the road sent a throb through her nose, and she kept swallowing as if swallowing could keep her from vomiting. The clinic lobby smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Alyssa sat among coughing children and exhausted adults, her hood pulled low, her face turned away as if shame could hide the infection. When the nurse called her name, Alyssa stood quickly and followed her down the hall. In the exam room, under harsh fluorescent light, Alyssa's nose looked even worse. The nurse took one glance and her expression tightened, professional but unmistakably alert. "Any fever?" "I don't know," Alyssa whispered. "Maybe. I've been sweating at night." "Pain?" "Yes. Any surgery recently?" Alyssa hesitated. Then her voice broke. "I had a nose job 2 months ago." The nurse's eyes flicked upward. "Where?" Alyssa gave the spa name. The nurse didn't react like someone impressed. She reacted like someone recognizing a pattern. She left the room without speaking, and minutes later a doctor came in. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, calm, the kind of calm that didn't soothe you, the kind that made you realize how serious something was. He asked her to remove her mask. Alyssa did. The doctor leaned closer. He didn't touch her at first. He simply looked, long enough for silence to become unbearable. Then he said quietly, "This isn't normal post-operative swelling." Alyssa's breath caught. Can you give me antibiotics?" The doctor's face remained neutral, but his voice sharpened slightly. "You're past the point where oral antibiotics alone are enough. This appears to be an active infection with possible implant exposure." Alyssa stared at him. "Implant exposure?" He pointed carefully, not touching her skin. "This area at the tip. Your tissue looks thin and compromised. There's drainage, there's odor. That suggests bacteria have colonized the implant site." Alyssa's chest tightened. "So what does that mean?" "It means," the doctor said slowly, "if that implant is exposed, your body can't protect itself. It becomes a highway for infection." Her pulse hammered. I just wanted to look better for my wedding." The doctor didn't soften. He didn't judge. He simply told the truth. "You need to go to the emergency room. Today. Not tomorrow. Not after work. Today. You need imaging. You need 4 antibiotics. And you may need surgery to remove the implant." The word remove rang through her head like an alarm. "But if they remove it, what will my nose look like?" she asked, voice trembling. The doctor looked at her, and for the first time his expression showed something like sympathy. "Right now the priority is not what it looks like. The priority is stopping this from spreading." Alyssa blinked, confused. "Spreading where?" His gaze didn't waver. "The structures around your nose connect to deeper areas. The orbit, the sinuses. In rare cases, infections in the central face can spread inward." Inward, that word again. Her aunt's voice flashed in her memory, like a ghost at the dinner table. "Doctors call that part of the face a risk area." Alyssa's hands trembled in her lap. Her mouth went dry. The doctor handed her a piece of paper with the hospital's address and a referral note. "This is urgent," he said. "Do not drive yourself if you feel dizzy. Call someone." Alyssa nodded, but she was barely hearing him. Her brain was stuck on one thing, inward, toward the brain. She walked back to her car like someone moving underwater. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. For the first time, her pride didn't matter. Her wedding didn't matter. Her image didn't matter. She opened her messages. Ryan's name sat there like a locked door. She typed, "I need help." She stared at the words, then added, "Please." Then she hit send. The message went through, but the little delivered notification didn't appear. She tried calling him, straight to voicemail. Her throat tightened. The air around her felt thin. She sat there in her parked car, gripping the steering wheel, and finally, The full weight of what she'd done crashed down on her. She hadn't just risked a bad result, she had risked her face, her health, her future, and now she was facing it alone. Alyssa drove to the hospital anyway. Every minute felt like a countdown. The sky was bright, the day ordinary, people walking their dogs and buying groceries, living as if the world was safe. But inside Alyssa's body, something was moving, quietly, relentlessly, and in the passenger seat beside her, her bridal planner sat open to a page that read, in elegant script, 6 weeks until the big day. She didn't even have the strength to close it. Alyssa didn't remember stepping out of the car. She only knew the automatic doors of the emergency room parted like cold steel curtains, and suddenly she was being swallowed by a flurry of urgency she had never truly understood until now. Her heart thudded so loudly she was sure the entire ER could hear it. Lights buzzed overhead, sterile and harsh, like spotlights on a stage she never wanted to perform on. A nurse grabbed her chart without even asking her name, guiding her down a hallway that smelled of rubbing alcohol and antiseptic sorrow. A young doctor in scrubs met her at the door of a treatment room, asking questions in rapid-fire tones that blurred together. How long has this been going on? 2 months? Any fever? A little? Any discharge? She looked down at her hands before whispering, yes, yellow. The doctor's face didn't soften. It didn't criticize. It simply shifted, like a weather vane turning toward a storm. We're going to start with imaging, he said, and blood work. I want to see how deep the infection has gone. A technician led her into an MRI scan room, cold, echoing, a machine that was both monstrous and silent. Alyssa lay there, hands clasped over her chest, listening to the metallic thrum of machinery as though it were something alive, something tapping directly against her spine. When the doctor returned, his expression was placid, neutral, yet the calmness felt heavier than any alarm. You have a significant infection, he said. It's affected the soft tissue, and there's concern that the implant may be the source. We need to remove it. The words hit her like a blow. Remove it? She echoed, voice trembling. But, the wedding, he held up a hand, not dismissive, just absolute. Your life matters more than a wedding. I understand the pressure you're under, but this infection can spread. To your sinuses, to planes near your eye. In very rare but documented cases, it can migrate inward to areas near the brain. Inward. The word flared in her mind, recalling that distant, whispered warning about the risk area. But this was no dinner table talk anymore. This was the cold math of reality. She wanted to argue, to beg, to explain that she needed this day, that she had to keep the wedding, that everything she had done, every tiny sacrifice, was for that one moment of perfection. But the doctor simply said, if you delayed treatment until after your wedding, we could be facing serious systemic infection. That would mean intravenous antibiotics, possibly multiple surgeries and a long recovery, but also, potentially, complications that could be life-threatening. You need to decide now. Alyssa didn't say anything. She asked instead, can I have the surgery afterward, like right after the wedding? The doctor looked at her like she had asked whether the sky could be pink. Your wedding should not be the priority over untreated infections that have a clear and present danger. The timeline here isn't something we can negotiate around a date. The infection has to be treated now. Treated now. The concept swirled through her head like smoke in a closed room. She tried to imagine herself on the altar, the way Ryan would watch her approach, the way her white dress caught the light, the way her hair fell just right. And suddenly it wasn't beautiful anymore. It was an impossible facade. Let me think, she whispered. The doctor nodded. He handed her a brochure about facial implant infections and the risks of delayed treatment. As he turned to leave, she barely noticed the subtle shift in his eyes, something softening, like empathy struggling to find purchase behind clinical training. Alone in the room, Alyssa stared at the brochure in her hands, the words swimming on the page: severe infection, tissue rejection, implant exposure, hospital admission, possible reconstruction surgery. She knew in that moment that she was standing at the edge of a decision that would define the rest of her life: a wedding with a disfigured nose, or survival. Not just living, survival with function, with the possibility of healing. The phone in her pocket buzzed. It was Sneakers against linoleum before she even saw the name Ryan. She used every breath she had not to crumble when she saw it. No message, no explanation. Just the name lighting up the screen like a faded stepping stone she wasn't sure she still remembered the path to. Her fingers hovered above call. She didn't press it. Instead, she placed the phone face down. She closed her eyes, and the tears finally fell. The night before the wedding was the longest night of Alyssa's life. She lay in the bed she had chosen with Ryan 6 months earlier, one they had pictured themselves collapsing into after their honeymoon, but the sheets were tangled around her like ropes. The room was quiet in that heavy silence that came only in the small hours, when every passing car sounded like a threat and every tick of the clock whispered that time was dwindling. She had asked for a private room after the diagnosis, saying she needed peace, even though peace had fled from her weeks ago. The medical monitors in the corner beeped softly, a steady pulse that somehow felt like a countdown. Her phone was on the bedside table, face down, message notifications turned off. She couldn't bear another reminder that Ryan hadn't replied. Not a single text, not a missed call. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time her eyes shut, echoes of the doctor's words surfaced. Inward, deeper areas, potential danger. She envisioned bacteria moving through her, a silent invasion, crossing boundaries she never knew existed, toward sinuses, toward something inside her that was closer to her brain than she ever wanted to think about. She fought the images back, rolling onto her side, clutching the sheet to her chest, breathing shallowly. 1 more hour, 1 more hour. But instead of rest, she found herself staring at the ceiling, reliving every decision that brought her here. The photo shoot, the spa visit, the lies, the makeup, the hiding. The echo of Ryan's voice from weeks ago played in her head like a scratched record. You don't recognize the woman I'm supposed to marry anymore. She had been trying to recognize herself ever since. At 3:17 a.m., fatigue finally pulled her into a restless doze. In that half-dream state, she saw herself walking down an aisle, bathed in warm light, smiling at a future she once imagined she wanted. But the crowd's faces were blank, the wedding vows echoed hollowly, and the image of her nose, distorted and reflective, hovered between her and Ryan's face. Then she woke with a jolt. Pain shot through her. Not dull, not throbbing, sharp and crawling up the bridge of her nose. She gasped and reached for the pillow, clutching it to her face as if it could shield her from something unseen. Somewhere beyond that pain, she heard a beep, then another, and somewhere under those beeps there was a clock ticking. Morning couldn't come soon enough. When it did, it hit her like a spotlight. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, uninvited and unkind. The nurses had already stopped by to check her vitals. Breakfast had been delivered, cold oatmeal and juice, but she didn't have an appetite. Instead, she stared at the tray and thought about the last time she had eaten a meal with Ryan. She had been laughing then, unguarded, unaware that her reflection would one day become something that haunted her. By 9 o'clock, the wedding planner was at her door, clipboard in hand, wide-eyed and rehearsed. Good morning. Everything is on schedule. Makeup team arrives in 2 hours. Photographer in 3. Your first look with Ryan is at noon. Alyssa nodded. Her voice was thin. Wonderful, she said. The planner didn't notice the hollow-eyed tension in her expression, the way her shoulders were hunched as though she was bracing for a storm. Later, when the makeup team arrived, they treated her wounds like minor inconveniences. Concealer here, contour there. We'll make it look amazing in photos, they assured her brightly. But makeup could not change what was happening underneath. By the time she stepped into the bridal gown again, this time with lace that brushed her elbows and silk that cascaded to the floor, her stomach was tied in knots tighter than any corset. The photographer, a cheerful woman with a gentle voice, tried to coax a smile. Look at me, Alyssa. Think of a happy memory. Alyssa forced one, a flash of Ryan's laugh from happier days, but it didn't reach her eyes. The curls of her hair brushed the side of her face, and for the first time that day, she caught her reflection in a mirror a makeup assistant had placed nearby. The look that met her wasn't the radiant bride she had once dreamed of becoming. Her nose was asymmetrical, the bridge uneven, the area around the tip slightly discolored, highlighted by the bright studio lights. Even with filters and editing tools at their disposal, there was something there that no amount of Photoshop could completely hide. The photographer paused, camera lowered. You okay? She asked softly. Alyssa didn't respond. She didn't have an answer. Outside, the church bells rang, loud, bright, marking the hour. It should have been beautiful, powerful, transformative. Instead, it sounded like a countdown. When Ryan finally arrived to see her for the first look, The moment was fractured. He approached slowly, eyes soft with affection, but those eyes flicked once, just once, toward her nose. There was confusion there, then sadness he quickly masked with a smile. "You look stunning," he said, and it sounded true, but the hesitation lingered just below the surface. Alyssa blinked, holding his gaze as if she could will away the doubt. They walked down the aisle hand in hand. The guests rose, a collective sigh rippled through the crowd, but hushes followed them like echoes, soft yet pervasive, like a rumor that spreads without words. Something was off. People sensed it. A murmur here, a sideways glance there. Even the children at the front row tilted their heads as though trying to make sense of what they saw. Halfway down the aisle, Alyssa felt it again, that pressure in her sinuses rising like an invisible fist squeezing just behind her eyes. Her knees weakened, her breath hitched. The priest's voice became distant, like underwater static. Then the room tilted, and she collapsed. The world went raw and distorted, like a photograph ripped in half. Gasps. Chaos. Her white dress flared around her like shattered petals. Ryan was at her side in seconds, eyes wide, jaw tight, hands trembling as he called out for help. A wave of panic swept through the guests. Chairs scraped back, phones lifted, prayers murmured under breath. But in that moment, lying on the cold stone floor, the echo of her name bouncing overhead, Alyssa, realized the truth. This wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about survival. Alyssa awoke to the sterile hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. The white ceiling tile above her was dull, unremarkable, nothing like the vaulted archway of the church she had imagined seeing when she opened her eyes. Her mouth felt dry, her throat sore, and her body heavy, like she was moving through water instead of waking in a bed. For a long moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all rushed back. The aisle, the silence, the collapse, the flashes of concerned faces. Ryan's voice calling her name. She blinked, heart hammering, and realized someone was sitting beside her. Not just anyone. It was Ryan. He wasn't holding her hand. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't watching her with love or longing. He looked tired, bone-deep tired, like someone who had carried a weight for too long and finally set it down. When he noticed her eyes flicker open, he exhaled, a breath that sounded like worry caught in his chest. But he didn't lean in. He just stayed a little farther away than she expected. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," she replied softly, unsure if her voice was even her own anymore. There was a long pause, heavy as gravity. She tried to move her head, but the pain lights flared sharply behind her eyes. She sucked in a breath, teeth clenched, and forced herself to stay still. "Slow," he murmured. She nodded. Ryan didn't touch her again. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small coffee cup, lukewarm, abandoned, and set it on the bedside table. "I thought you might want this," he said. Alyssa stared at the cup, then looked up at him again. His face was composed, but his eyes were solemn. Not angry, just distant. "Where?" she began, but her voice cracked. "You're in the hospital," he finished for her. "They admitted you after the collapse. They said you were dehydrated and in pain. Lab work showed elevated infection markers. They want to clean the area again, possibly revise the wound before it gets worse." She looked down at her lap, hands folded on the blanket. The words sank in slowly, like ice cubes melting on skin. "So, I survived?" Ryan's brow softened a little. "You're alive. Alive." It should have been a relief, but instead it felt like another weight, heavier than she had expected. He waited, eyes fixed on her hands. Then, in a voice that was both gentle and firm, he said, "Alyssa, we need to talk." Her breath hitched. He didn't have to say it. She already knew. "I wasn't there," he began. "Not at the ceremony. Not afterward. When I saw you on the floor, when I realized how far this had gone, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I left to get my thoughts together." Her stomach twisted. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," he continued. "I left because I was afraid I'd say something you wouldn't be able to hear. Something you'd hate me for saying. But you deserve the truth." His eyes flicked up, meeting hers, steady, unguarded. "I love you, Alyssa. I have for a long time. But I don't recognize the person you became. Not the one making decisions about your health, your body, without including me. Not the one who hid this from me until it was too late." She felt a sting, a command from deep inside her chest, clenching something she didn't know how to open. Ryan continued, his voice calm but unwavering. You kept pushing me away, and when I tried to reach out, you turned me down. Your pride became stronger than our connection, and I couldn't watch you destroy yourself. Tears formed, not the dramatic kind, but steady, slow, like water cutting grooves into stone. I'm sorry, he said, for not being there in that moment. But I can't stay now. She didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she understood. The room was quiet, except for the beep of monitors and the soft hum of hospital air. Ryan stood up slowly, hesitantly, as if each step cost him something. I'll check in with your doctor, he said. Make sure they update me on your condition. I just need some time. And space. Alyssa felt something hollow inside her, like when a room loses its lights, but the brightness still lingers in your mind because you remember it once existed. He paused at the door, hand on the frame. I love you, he said. Goodbye, he didn't say out loud. But it hung in the air, a sentence unfinished, a vow unspoken. Then he left. The door clicked shut, and she was alone. For a long moment she didn't cry. She just stared at the door, as if waiting for it to open again, for him to step back in with a smile and pretend this was all just a sad dream. But the door stayed closed. She shifted, pain sliding through her like glass and bone, and turned her head toward the window. The sky was gray, cloud-heavy and unrelenting, like the weather had adapted to her mood. She felt smaller now, like a storm-ridden house battered by winds, standing alone on an endless plain. She thought about all the times she had wanted to be seen, really seen by the world, by Ryan, by herself, and now she was seen. Just not in the way she had wanted, not in the way she had imagined. She was seen as someone damaged, someone broken, someone who had chosen the wrong path. Alyssa closed her eyes and let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady drops that pooled in silence against her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she didn't hide them, not from a mirror, not from a mask, not from camera filters, just herself. Alyssa stayed in that hospital bed long after Ryan left. His absence was louder than any scream. The stillness that settled in the room felt like the weight of every word he'd said, pressing down on her ribs, pinning her to the mattress. No calls, no messages, nothing, just the quiet beep of machines and the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator. Almost like a heartbeat, steady and unfeeling. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the last time she had felt normal. Was it before the wedding? Before the procedure? Or had normal been gone long before any of this, buried underneath every filtered photo, every whispered comparison, every time she tried and failed to love the face in the mirror? Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, but the name flashing on the screen made her stomach rearrange itself into knots. Unknown number. She didn't want to answer. Still, curiosity pried her thumbs open, and she tapped the screen. Are you okay? I heard. No name, no identity. Just the beginning of someone's concern. She wiped a finger across the message, heart fluttering with something she hadn't felt in days. Hope? No, something weaker, something that felt like the ghost of hope. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned the phone face down again and stared at the ceiling. Eventually, the nurse came in to draw more blood, check her vitals, refill her medications. Routine, mechanical, reassuring in a way she didn't expect. After the nurse left, Alyssa sat up slowly, gingerly swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet touched the cool floor. She stood there for a moment, unsteady like a vessel trying to find its center of gravity again. And then she thought about work. She had a job, once, a job she liked, a job that gave her identity outside of wedding plans, outside of expectations. She was someone people respected, people listened to, not someone reduced to a cautionary headline in some clickbait article, not someone's sad story. Her phone buzzed again. This time the name was familiar. Mom, how are you holding up? I spoke to the doctor. He said you need rest and calm. Please eat something. She felt a twist in her chest, like guilt had come to sit beside her, but she didn't reply. She just stared at the message, then slid the phone into her pocket and walked out of the room. The hallway was quiet. The cleaning staff pushed carts with tires that squeaked, sharp in the hush of early afternoon. A woman in scrubs passed her with a gentle nod, eyes sympathetic but professional. Alyssa kept walking. She found a window seat and looked out, Below, cars moved in steady lines, people living ordinary lives, unaware of the slow collapse of someone else's entire world. She wondered how many of them were unhappy in silence, wearing masks that didn't fit, hiding parts of themselves they thought were ugly, unwanted, unlovable. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I saw the news. I hope you get better. I'm here if you need help. No name, no explanation of how they knew. Just concern. Her breath caught, but she didn't respond. Not yet. She slid back into her room and opened the window a crack. A faint breeze drifted in. It carried nothing special. No scent of flowers, no sound of laughter. Just the ordinary whisper of air moving through a small world. And for a moment, it felt like a permission slip. Not to be okay. Just to be. She walked toward the bathroom mirror and stopped. For weeks she had avoided mirrors, phones with front cameras, reflections in windows, anything that showed her face. Now she stood in front of it. The face looking back was unfamiliar, tired, gaunt, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, and the nose, her nose, still bore the mark of her choices, uneven, slightly discolored, a shadow of what she thought beauty had promised her. Her breath shook. She picked up a tissue and pressed it against her cheek, wiping away the film of sadness. That's when it hit her, deep and unexpected. Not guilt, not shame, not regret, but something sharper. She had been hiding behind makeup, behind excuses, behind photos carefully curated to show perfection. Hiding from the world, yes, but even more, hiding from herself. She had dressed her insecurity like armor, and when the armor broke, she didn't know who she was without it. Tears came again, slow, steady, but this time they weren't about loss, they were about clarity. She traced the edge of her nose in the mirror, not with longing for what could have been, but with a slow recognition of what was. Alyssa wasn't perfect, not even close, but she was still here. She walked back to the bed and sat down, folding her hands in her lap like someone trying to gather the pieces of a lesson she hadn't wanted to learn. Her phone buzzed again. "Mom, please eat something. I'm worried about you." She typed slowly, "I'm awake." Then she looked at the message again and added, "I'll try to eat." Not a lie, not a promise she could keep, just a start. The day went on like that. Nurses came. Doctors came. One of them mentioned surgery again, possible wound care, a plan for antibiotics that would keep her stable, a timeline for removing the implant. Nothing about beauty, nothing about filters, nothing about weddings, just life, slow, unpolished, real. By the evening, the hospital corridor was dim, the overhead lights softer, less intrusive. The cleaning staff had exchanged their squeaky carts for muted footsteps. The sound was gentler now, like the world was settling down, prepping for rest. Alyssa walked back to the window. Night had fallen, and distant lights blinked from passing cars, buildings, windows, tiny anchors of life in the dark, and she thought about all the things that had seemed important before. Photos, perfection, filters, likes, approval. She thought about how easily she had traded the love of a real person for the approval of strangers. Her heart thudded again, slower now, steadier. She exhaled, and for the first time in a long while she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Not happiness, not joy, not acceptance yet, just possibility. A quiet, fragile seed of something that might grow into strength, or wisdom, or something like peace. She didn't know what it would become, but she stood there, watching the lights below, and let herself breathe. Because if she could face this, if she could face herself, maybe one day she could face the world again. Maybe. The waiting room was nothing like the glossy, Instagrammable lounges Alyssa had seen at the spa where it all began. No golden letters, no flower walls, no faint scent of vanilla candles trying to whisper luxury, just a clean space, muted earth tones, a large window with real sunlight, not ring lights, pouring in. It felt like a place for healing, not performing. She sat in a chair near the window, legs crossed tightly, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Her face was wrapped in a soft bandage, the swelling still obvious beneath the gauze. She had barely stepped outside since the wedding day, even less since Ryan left. She hadn't come here to fix the past. She knew better now. There was no undoing the scar on her wedding photos, no erasing the silence of the man she once thought she'd grow old with. But maybe, just maybe, She could understand. Make peace with what her body had tried to scream while her ego refused to listen. The door opened. "Ms. Reed?" She stood. The nurse offered a kind smile and led her down a quiet hallway. The air was clean, medical, but not sterile, calming in a way she didn't expect, almost respectful. Inside the consultation room stood a man in his early 50s, wearing a light blue coat and wire-rimmed glasses. His face was calm, his movements measured, like someone who had seen far worse but never lost his ability to care. "Dr. Hanley," he said, offering a hand. "Alyssa," she replied softly. He gestured for her to sit, then opened a slim file in front of him. "I've gone through the hospital reports," he began. "Your ENT forwarded me the scan results, cultures, and photos from the procedure. I also reviewed your pre-op notes from the spa, or rather the lack of them." Alyssa's stomach tightened. Dr. Hanley looked up. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "You're not the first person who's come through my door after something like this, and unfortunately, you won't be the last." There was no judgment in his voice, just fact. "But I do want you to understand what happened, not just cosmetically, biologically, because I think you deserve to know what your body went through." She nodded slowly. "Okay." Dr. Hanley stood and pulled a tablet from the counter, then swiped through several medical diagrams. "First," he said, tapping an image of the human nose cross-section, "your implant material was solid silicone. This type of material has been used in cosmetic surgeries for decades, but it has one major flaw: it's not porous." He looked at her. "That means your body can't integrate with it. It just sits there, foreign, inert, like a stone in soft ground, and some bodies don't like that." Alyssa swallowed. "You mean my body rejected it?" He nodded. "Not in the dramatic sense of an organ transplant, but slowly, silently. Your immune system saw something it didn't recognize, and instead of adapting, it walled it off, created inflammation, fluid, pressure, a silent war happening under your skin." Alyssa leaned forward slightly, drawn in despite herself. "That war," Dr. Hanley continued, "became dangerous when two more things happened. First, the environment. The spa that did your surgery didn't use hospital-grade sterilization. Their tools, their gloves, even the room, none of it met clinical standards." He paused. "That allowed bacteria, ordinary skin bacteria, the kind that lives on all of us, to get into a place where it shouldn't be." She felt the shame creep up her spine, but he didn't let it sit too long. "Second, the post-op antibiotics. From what I can see, they prescribed you a broad-spectrum oral antibiotic for 7 days. Alyssa nodded. "It helped, at first. It often does," he said. "But here's the problem. Antibiotics aren't magic. They suppress. They don't fix. Especially not when the foreign body is still present. Once you stop taking them, the inflammation came back. Stronger." "Why didn't they remove it?" she whispered. "Because they didn't want to lose the sale," Dr. Hanley said, voice firm for the first time. "Because places like that sell beauty like a product. But your body isn't a product." He sat down again, folding his hands. "Your body was trying to tell you something. The swelling, the pressure, the subtle shifts in how it felt. That wasn't failure. That was defense." She blinked back a sudden surge of tears. I thought I was making myself better," she said. "I know," he said. "But you weren't broken. You were responding to the world around you, comparing, judging, striving, all very human things. But the truth is, your body didn't need fixing, it needed honoring." Alyssa looked away, ashamed. "I ignored it," she murmured. "I kept pressing forward, even when it hurt, even when it smelled, even when I knew something was wrong." He nodded solemnly. "Pain is not weakness," he said. "It's language. Your body doesn't speak English or numbers or trends. It speaks in sensation. And when we ignore that voice long enough, it doesn't whisper anymore. It screams." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the air conditioner, the quiet tick of a clock, the distant sound of someone laughing in the hallway. Then Dr. Hanley continued, softer this time. "The good news is, you caught it in time. We'll need to remove the implant, allow the tissue to heal, and monitor the infection site carefully. The scarring will be minimal with proper care, but it will take time. There's no shortcut now." Alyssa exhaled slowly. Her fingers gripped the fabric of her jeans. "I don't care how long it takes," she said. I want to feel safe in my face again." Dr. Hanley smiled. "Quiet, sincere. That's a good place to start." He stood, offered her a tissue and said, "Let's begin by listening to what your body's been trying to say all along." Alyssa sat quietly, the air in the consultation room seeming heavier than it should be, weighted by a mix of medical reality and personal reckoning. Dr. Hanley closed the tablet, the images of cross-section diagrams fading into the background, leaving an unspoken truth settling into the space between them. Her body had been trying to communicate, and she had ignored it. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence linger just long enough for her to feel it fully in her bones. Finally, he cleared his throat and met her eyes, not with pity, but with clarity. "Let's talk about how your body speaks," he said. A simple sentence. But in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. He pulled up another image, this one a graphic of the entire facial vascular system. Lines, curves, tiny pathways of blood vessels that crisscrossed beneath the skin like tributaries of a hidden river. "Your face," he began, "is not just some flat surface to be improved. It is an incredibly complex system where every part supports the whole. The skin, the blood vessels, the nerves, the connective tissue. They all communicate in ways most people never consider." Alyssa listened, leaning forward, the bandage at the side of her face itching beneath her fingers. "When you introduce something foreign," he continued, "your body doesn't ask for permission. It investigates. It sends out its first responders. Not white coats and sterile tools, but cells. Tiny immune cells that patrol every inch of your tissue. They don't work alone," he explained. "They carry memory. They carry instinct. Their job isn't to reject everything unfamiliar. They're designed to protect you. They know the difference between something that should be there and something that shouldn't." He pointed to the graphic. "These vessels here," his finger traced a pathway beneath the nasal bridge, "feed directly into what we call the danger triangle of the face. That's not a dramatic name doctors give for fun. It's because infections in this region don't behave like they do elsewhere. In most parts of the body, an infection stays local. Here, it can move inward, along the same pathways that lead toward your sinuses and even the cranial cavity." Alyssa felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The word inward, echoes of it still hovered in her mind like an ominous refrain. "But here's the part most people never understand," he said, leaning back. "Your body isn't against you. It isn't your enemy. It's the most finely tuned system you will ever encounter. You can override it with drugs, with filters, with surgery, but you can't silence it." He paused, letting the truth settle. "You are not a machine to be optimized. You are a living system, and systems talk." Alyssa blinked, feeling the edges of denial soften into something more like comprehension. "So what happened to me?" she whispered. Dr. Hanley turned his gaze back to her, steady and sincere. "What happened is this. You ignored the earliest signals. The subtle tension under the skin, the pressure that didn't hurt in the traditional sense, but felt off. You interpreted silence as safety, and that was a misunderstanding." He shook his head gently. "Your immune system gave you signs, not loud ones at first, but it was speaking, and then when the bacteria infiltrated the area during the procedure, because the environment wasn't sterile, the body responded more aggressively. It created inflammation. It tried to wall off the foreign substance. It attempted to rebuild what it thought was broken." His eyes softened, not with judgment, but with honesty. Inflammation is the body's first language of distress. It's heightening blood flow. It's calling in reinforcements. It's not failure. It's protection. Alyssa nodded slowly, the words sinking in. He continued, "Think of it this way. If you sprain your ankle, you rest it. If you get a fever, you slow down. If your eyes are irritated, you blink. Your body asks for attention. You respond. In your case, the signals were more subtle at first, so you ignored them. And then, when the bacterial activity increased, your immune response also increased. But because there was foreign material in a critical area, the response became compounded." He paused, letting it all hang in the air. "So your body wasn't failing you, it was protecting you. And when it couldn't truly resolve the issue with the foreign implant present, the situation escalated." Alyssa closed her eyes, feeling strange gratitude. Not for what had happened, but for the clarity that was now unfolding. She had believed her body to be flawed. She had seen its responses as inconveniences, things to manage, things to hide, things to fix. But it was none of those. It was communication. Dr. Hanley continued, softer this time. Your body doesn't want to be perfect, it wants to function. It doesn't ask for beauty, it asks for balance. It doesn't crave symmetry, it craves homeostasis. When health is stable, we don't notice it. That's the irony. Perfection isn't visible, health is subtle. Quiet, Alyssa swallowed. She remembered her own thoughts back when it all began. The fear of not being beautiful enough, of not being worthy of focus, of not being understood by the world. She realized now how misaligned her priorities had been. Dr. Hanley closed the tablet and looked at her with steadiness. Not pity, not clinical detachment, but genuine compassion. You asked earlier why this happened, he said. Not why you got an infection, but why it happened to you. And the answer isn't simple. Part of it was the choice of material. Part of it was the setting where the procedure occurred. But the other part, maybe the biggest part, is that you were listening to the voices around you more than you were listening to the one inside you. Your body was communicating, you just didn't recognize its language. Alyssa let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The room was quiet, and then softly she spoke. So, what now? He smiled, not a clinical smile but a human one. Now we help your body finish speaking, he said. We remove the foreign material, we treat the infection, we support your tissues in healing, we give it a chance to restore balance. But more than that, he continued, we teach you to hear what your body tells you, not just its extremes, but its subtleties. Because once you can do that, you protect yourself from choices based on fear or comparison. You honor your body for what it is, not what someone else's filter tells you it should be. Her eyes were wet, not with self-loathing anymore, but with familiarity. She had lived with her own body for 27 years. It had carried her flawlessly through childhood, through heartbreak, through achievement, through every untold moment of life. She had only just realized she had never truly listened. Dr. Hanley reached across and handed her a small pamphlet, softly printed, informative, not alarmist. Your immune system, it read. A guide to understanding your body's natural defenses. Under the bright letters, a simple line stood out, your body speaks. Learn its language. Alyssa pressed her thumb against those words. It wasn't a promise of perfection. It wasn't a guarantee of happiness, but it was something else, something quieter, something true, a beginning. Alyssa didn't remember the exact moment she stopped counting days. Time had lost its shape in the hospital, where mornings bled into afternoons and weekends were just another series of monitors and paperwork. But somewhere along the way, she stopped counting and started noticing. She noticed the softness of the morning sun spilling onto her bedspread. She noticed the way her own name sounded when she whispered it into the mirror. She noticed the small, steady rhythm of her breath, something she had once taken for granted. It was subtle, but it was the beginning. When she first walked into Dr. Hanley's office that day, she had expected disaster, a reckoning, a report card for all her mistakes, something final, irreversible. Instead, she found something she never thought she'd hear, a plan. It began with servicing the infection, a careful, methodical plan involving gentle debridement, antibiotics administered intravenously, and a timetable that acknowledged pace, not perfection. There were follow-up appointments, wound care, and a physical therapy plan for the tissues that had been stressed beyond their capacity. But the plan wasn't just about healing her face, it was about relearning her body. In the first few weeks, healing was a physical act. Bandages came off. Scars lightened. The inflammation receded. Every tiny improvement was magnified in her mind like a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. But it wasn't until she began to speak aloud what she felt that her world truly began to shift. It started with the mirror. One day, weeks after her treatment began, she stood before it without bandages for the first time. The face that met her gaze was hers, and it was undeniably marked by experience. Not smooth, not perfect, not symmetrical in any magazine-worthy way, just real. Her eyes were still deep-set from days without sleep. Her skin bore faint marbling where stitches had once nestled. Her nose, her real nose, no longer masked by infection or makeup, was unique in a way that no filter could replicate. She looked at herself, and she didn't look away. It wasn't a triumphant moment. No soundtrack swelled behind her reflection. No triumphant music, just a stillness, a quiet acceptance that she had not known before. She whispered to her reflection, "You're still here." It was the truth, and it was enough. Buoyed by that moment, Alyssa began to write. Not a diary, not a secret note in her phone. Something public, something vulnerable. She started a blog, an honest one. The first post was simple. I survived my own expectations. It opened with a photo. Not a staged one like her old selfies, but a raw shot taken by one of the nurses, capturing her in a candid moment with hospital blankets tucked around her chest, eyes weary but steady. The caption read, "This was the day I realized that perfection was never the goal. Survival was." The blog post was emotional, but it was rooted in clarity. She wrote about the impulses that drove her to choose aesthetics over health. She wrote about comparison, of how it had convinced her that her natural face was insufficient, not beautiful enough for her wedding day, not enough for the photos, not enough for anyone's admiration. She wrote about the infection. She wrote about the pain. She wrote about losing Ryan. And she wrote about losing herself. But she didn't end the post on despair. She wrote, "I am more than the sum of my scars. I am learning to be whole in quiet, imperfect moments. Not for applause, not for approval, but for peace." She hesitated before hitting publish. Her hands shook. What if people mocked her? What if the comments were cruel? What if nobody cared? But there was no going back. She clicked post. The response surprised her. Not thousands of likes, not viral attention, but steady, compassionate replies. Messages like, "Thank you for sharing your truth. I've been there too. Your words helped me reconsider my own choices. Beauty isn't worth your health." And one message that made her pause. It was from an unknown account. "I don't know you, but thank you. I almost made the same choice." She stared at the message, and for the first time in a long while she felt something that was not interior turmoil. She felt connection. It wasn't the connection she had wanted before. Not admiration, not likes, not scores, just truth. It wasn't long before she received invitations, speaking invitations, small podcasts, online health forums, one local television segment investigating cosmetic procedure safety. Each time she considered backing out. Each time she didn't. Her voice became rough around the edges, not soft and curated, but real. She spoke about her experience, about misinformation, about how the body communicates in its own language, through pressure, through pain, through signs that beg to be listened to. She became a voice for caution, for self-respect, for internal listening. She wasn't preaching fear. She was teaching awareness. But the most profound change happened inside her, not in the comments, not on podcasts, not in the sympathetic nods of strangers, but in the way she began to see herself. She walked outside without makeup one morning. Just sunlight, a cup of coffee, and a face that bore the quiet traces of a battle fought and not forgotten. She looked up at the sky, dusty blue, streaked with light clouds, and breathed, not in a moment of triumph, but in a moment of peace. She didn't hear Ryan's name echo in her mind anymore, not as a haunting, not as a regret, but as a memory woven into her story. She was no longer defined by the absence of perfection. She was defined by her willingness to confront reality. The day she resumed work, her heart fluttered like a bird learning to fly again. Her colleagues had listened to her story. Some were stunned, some were emotional, some were even moved to tears, but none of them looked at her with pity. They looked at her with respect, not for the pain she had endured, but for the courage she had found. And gradually, the blog posts grew into something more, an online series, then a dedicated website, then invitations to speak at workshops about body autonomy, self-awareness, and informed decisions in aesthetics. It wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune, but it was meaningful. Alyssa learned that the face she once wanted to perfect was already complete in its own way, if only she had known how to listen. One evening, months later, she walked along a quiet street, window lights flickering like tiny constellations, and she caught her reflection in a cafe window. She paused. It was not the face she had once dreamed of, not flawless, not symmetrical, not glamorous, but real, and for the first time she didn't flinch. She smiled, just a small one, gentle, unforced, and she thought, I am alive, I am learning, I am enough, not because the world told her so, not because of any filter, not because of approval, but because she finally trusted the voice she had ignored for so long, the one that lived inside her own body, speaking in the language she had learned to hear, and it was whispering, not perfection, just peace. Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't the ones we see in the mirror, they're the ones we carry from not listening to ourselves. Alyssa's story isn't just about a failed surgery, it's about the quiet, powerful truth. Your body was never the problem. The silence around it was. Let this be your reminder. You were born complete. You were born enough. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. So tell me, have you ever ignored a small voice inside, only to wish you'd listened sooner? Leave your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you think twice about beauty, pain, or pressure, hit the like button. Subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to change the way we see ourselves.